Hello there on this nice snowy night in winter. Thought we would discuss The Castle by Franz Kafka. It was late evening when Kay arrived. The village lay under deep snow. There was no sign of the castle hill. Fog and darkness surrounded it. Not even the faintest gleam of light suggested a large castle. Kay stood a long time on the wooden bridge that leads from the main road to the village, gazing upward into the seeming emptiness. After graduating in May of 2025, I was hired to work as a secretary at the same sister university that I had just graduated from. First, it seemed nice. The pay was steady, it had good benefits, and I was working with people I already knew. But then, the routine set in. This job, the tedium that could be found in Franz Kafka's The Castle, was my daily life. The halls are sleepy. The work is of minuscule importance. And every day, I'm searching for meaning. Feelings of being trapped, stuck, and suffocating were feelings of a daily occurrence. It was at this job, fittingly enough, that I read a majority of The Castle. With barely any students at the end of the fall 2025 semester, my days went on like calm seas, calm, boring seas. I was like a mad ship captain who wanted some sort of chaos, but was forced to sit at a desk and stare at a computer for 9 hours a day. Of course, I don't mean to complain, it's not a terrible job, but it does leave you with time. With that time, I read and reflected on The Castle. I was enthralled with the mysterious, rule-bound village that lies below the true destination of Kay's The Castle. It's a novel that treads on with the cadence, minutia, and focused action of someone doing their taxes. Judging or reviewing a piece of work by Kafka is really difficult, as a lot of it was left unfinished during his lifetime, but I will say it was certainly not a favorite work of his. Beyond those small criticisms, the work's tediousness is there to serve a point, regardless of the actual reading of it to be dull. With all of the book's monologues over hierarchies, rules, and the minutia of bureaucracy, it's written out in such excessive banality to show to the reader that this system is not designed to make sense. For this reading, I used the modern Mark Harmon translation, which is said to be the standard in modern times. In earlier editions, they would often translate the first edition of the text. The problem with this, though, is that Kafka's best friend Max Brod heavily edited the first edition so it could get published, rather than worrying about the way and specifically that Kafka wanted the book to be written. The novel opens with a character we only know of as Kay arriving in a snow-sunken village, fog and darkness deceiving his eyes and disguising the nature of the castle to him. He's a surveyor sent on order of the castle's count. And so, to seek shelter from the snow, he takes lodging in a small inn in a humble straw bed. He is only allowed a few hours of sleep, though, because, well, he gets woken up by one of the castle officials who says he's not allowed to sleep there unless given permission by the castle's count. Arguing with the man for a little bit, this is where he is first introduced to the weird and surreal rules of this village. What follows in the rest of the novel is Kay's many attempts and failures at gaining entrance to the castle. Most of the villagers hold no real understanding of the castle's inner workings, but hold complete reverence for them nonetheless. Kay is pushed and pulled from each of the villagers, trying to find some sort of cold reasoning to the way in which he is being treated. Due to the nature of Kay being a surveyor brought in from some far-off, unspecified land, the Count gives Kay 2 assistants to be in charge of, who are childlike and odd in their behaviors. Kay holds nothing but resentment towards them, treating them more like badly trained puppy dogs than people, berating them and sometimes even physically hitting them, trying as he might to get them to go away. No sooner had they all left than Kay said to the assistants, "Go away!" Baffled by this unexpected command, they complied, but when Kay locked the door behind them, they immediately tried to come back in and began whispering and knocking on the door. "You're dismissed," Kay cried. "I will never employ you in my service again." They weren't willing to accept this, though, and hammered with their hands and feet on the door. "Let us come back to you, sir," they cried, as if Kay were the land and they were about to sink in the floods. But Kay had no sympathy for them. He waited impatiently for the moment when the unbearable noise would force the teacher to intervene. Along with these assistants, Kay meets a woman in one of the village inns by the name of Frieda, who, upon first meeting, shares with Kay her access to a castle official by the name of Clam, by way of being his mistress when he comes to work in the village. She lets Kay glimpse the man through a small peephole, but only a glimpse, as Clam remains an elusive figure going forward. It's at this very first meeting with Frieda that they decide they're in love. Frieda quits her job at the inn and moves in with Kay and his 2 assistants in the small 1-bedroom of the inn, much to the disapproval of the inn's landlady, who has her own internal reasoning for disliking Kay. "Listen here, surveyor. Mr. Clam is a gentleman from the castle, and that signifies in and of itself, even leaving aside Clam's other position, a very high rank. But what are you? You, the very person whom we are so humbly imploring that he must deign to consider marriage. You're not from the castle, you're not from the village, you are nothing. Unfortunately, though, you are something, a stranger, one who is superfluous and gets in the way everywhere, one who is a constant source of trouble, and who, for instance, makes it necessary for us to dislodge the maids, one who seduces our dearest little Frieda, one whose intentions are utterly unknown here, but who is unfortunately the very person to whom we must give her away." Aside from these characters, there are a myriad of other villagers, such as Barnabas, who works for the castle as a delivery boy, delivering letters, but he doesn't actually have any letters to deliver. He spends all of his days waiting in a small room for one of the castle officials to give him a letter, oftentimes almost wanting to fall from his fatigue. The first time he's even given a letter is when Kay enters the village. Of course, Barnabas has sufficient time to observe all this, since he stands there in the spectators' room for hours, sometimes days, before Clam's gaze falls on him. And even when Clam has seen him and Barnabas comes to attention, nothing decisive has happened, since Clam can turn away from him again and go back to his book and forget him. That's what often happens. Kay as a character and central protagonist isn't one that is particularly likable, but his plight is one that is still endlessly relatable. The way in which Kay views and treats the world is with a similar cold and strange logic that the castle treats the village to. He gives great importance to roles, titles, and hierarchies, viewing others in smaller roles as insignificant, but viewing his own role as more significant than it really is. The authorities and officials of the castle are completely impossible to communicate with or even come into contact with, and Kay isn't the only one that has these difficulties. One of the villagers, the father of Barnabas, stands out on the side of the road in the freezing snow every day, waiting for the officials' stagecoaches to arrive, though they always ignore him and treat him with indifference. He had prepared a plan to post himself on the main road near the castle, where the officials' carriages went by, and then, if at all possible, to present his appeal for forgiveness. Frankly, it was a plan quite devoid of reason. even if the impossible had come about and the appeal had actually reached the ear of an official. For is an individual official capable of granting pardon? At best, this might be a matter for the administration as a whole, but even it is incapable of granting forgiveness. It can only judge. The novel ends with Kay's questions cast in as much shadowy doubt as they had in the beginning of the novel, finding no answers for any of his questions, and his search for the castle seemingly going on forever, as the novel was left unfinished. It ends with Kay getting employment through a man who really only wants him for his connection with one of the castle's secretaries, as the other villagers want to contact the castle as well. The book is a puzzle with pieces that aren't meant to fit together. Kafka did not finish the castle, and somehow that makes the book work better, to me at least anyways. It was actually mentioned that Kafka told Max Brod that his ending that he envisioned for this novel was him to wait out his life in the village until he grew to be an old man, where he would finally gain access to the castle. But of course, Kafka was not able to finish that, as he had stopped writing it shortly before his death, but we're not really sure if he even had the intention to pick it back up if he hadn't died.